If anything, I just want you guys to know that I'm also just stating my concerns that I have for the DLC. This isn't like, this isn't like I'm just saying, oh, I'm not going to play this. This sucks. I'm not trying to be negative. This is basically just me stating, my concerns for what I think, and I hope that this isn't what happens, but it seems there's a high probability that this is the route that they're going to go, and especially for Resident Evil 9 in the future, but I hope that's not the case. This whole thing that of the zombie grabbing Rose's face actually reminds me of the Dementors in the Harry Potter series. Alright, so in today's video, we're going to be reacting to 7 minutes of the Shadow of Rose DLC. Now, IGN did post a video showcasing those 7 minutes, but I gotta say it was pretty awful. Mostly due to the fact that, they just kind of zoomed in to the corner, so it actually gave a really bad representation of what those 7 minutes really are like, since we're not really getting the full screen. And so, yeah, but in this video that I actually found that we're going to be reacting to, it's actually going to showcase everything that they actually showed at the Tokyo Game Show. So anyways, let's have a look at that.
Rose 編はいスタート。シャドウオブローズ。おお。どこ？でもローズは顔見えるよ。可愛い。ちょっとなんかイーさんの顔見たことないけど、なんかお父さんに似てるね。見たことないんでしょ？わからないだろ。見たことないんでしょ？見たこと。
So the first thing I actually noticed right away is that I actually really like third person. I am actually really excited for the DLC, and I like how this is only going to be in third person, Shadow of Rose DLC, and also the fact that they're also bringing in that third person aspect to Resident Evil 8, the standard game. So yeah, really excited about that. It looks really nice. But in any case, let's continue.
ないけどなんか雰囲気あるな。確かに。どこだろこれ。これどこだ？調べる。これちょっと読むと時間かかるから各自でそうですねなんか化学物質的ななんかこと書いてるわみんなで確認しましょう自分で本番ね自分でやるときにこれ系ねはいこれは触っちゃいけない危ない危ない危ない危ない
Now, one of the things that I do find interesting about this DLC is the fact that it almost seems as if, because the developers did state that this is not going to be like a standard Resident Evil DLC. It's not in the Resident Evil world. So, and by the looks of it, and this is something that I already kind of figured from before, like with the shots that we received in the earlier trailers, mostly showcasing like the Duke and stuff and him looking different, or how Rose was seeing herself. It was very clear from the start that this was her interacting with the Megamycete. And I didn't really like that story part of Resident Evil 8. I thought that was kind of bordering on the paranormal. And it seems like this DLC is going and playing around that paranormal line. Now, I'm not a big fan of that, mostly because Resident Evil has never been a paranormal kind of a thing. This isn't Silent Hill, and so that's one of the things that I don't like. That's one of the reasons why I didn't really like Resident Evil 7. I didn't like the Resident Evil 8 part in House Beneviento with the whole baby thing. I didn't like how they were just trying to make it into like they were trying to make Resident Evil into a full horror game, but the issue with that is that Resident Evil has never been supernatural. If anything, they always go back and explain what goes on in these games in a scientific way, or they do that in their best of their abilities. Of course, none of this is real. We don't have zombies walking around, but it's believable in that point, right? It's always kind of grounded in that scientific kind of area. And House Beneviento did the same thing with the flower, and that was just a poor excuse. I didn't really like that. But anyways, I'm not going to go too much in detail as to why I don't like that part of House Beneviento. I'll go over that in another video. But going back to what I was saying, that's one of the things that I actually didn't like about the Resident Evil 7 was they kind of tried to incorporate the paranormal side to it. Now, this DLC is actually going to continue, and we're actually going to have a look at Rose using her special powers. Again, that's something that I don't like. I don't like that where they're taking the series. I hope Resident Evil 9 isn't like that, because I think that would be kind of stupid. It's kind of, it reminds me a lot of how Resident Evil 5 and Resident Evil 6, they really push the boundaries of the series to try, especially Resident Evil 6, to try to jam-pack as much action into the game. And a lot of people did not like Resident Evil 6 because of that. Well, why is that? Because they kind of lost their original vision of the game, which was always a survival horror, and it was never a paranormal story. Resident Evil has never been like that. And so I don't really like how, you know, this DLC is going to be in the Mega Mice seat. It's all going to be in Rose's head, and she's basically going to just, you know, she's going to get powers, and does her powers, you know, does she use them when she comes back to the real world? Because this, to me, seems like this DLC, all it is basically her going into the memories of the Mega Mice seat. Because when we played Resident Evil 8, that's what Miranda was stating, was that the Mega Mice seat kind of keeps the consciousness of people. And so, you know, I also saw some viewers or some people that watch this 7-minute gameplay, and a lot of them were like, I'm calling it, I'm saying that Ethan is the one that's writing the words on the side. And it's like, that's so lame, because again, that's kind of bordering on like the paranormal. Now Resident Evil 8, they did give an explanation to the paranormal side of things, so you know they are sticking to the Resident Evil aspect. But as soon as you start incorporating powers into the DLC, I have an issue with that, because now we're kind of going off of we're not sticking to the Resident Evil formula. If anything, it kind of reminds me of the Parasite Eve games. You know, Parasite Eve 2 especially, with that game, it was kind of like a copy and paste of Resident Evil, except you actually had supernatural powers. Now, I don't know if Resident Evil is going to continue in that route, but if they continue pushing this, you know, they're walking on that line right now, it seems, and they've been doing that since Resident Evil 7. You know, I don't know if I'm gonna like, because I'll tell you right now, I don't really like this direction that they're heading in, because it's the same thing about what they did with the action packed that occurred with Resident Evil 6. You know, the game lost all of its survival horror aspect. Now, Resident Evil 7 did have survival horror, but you know, that paranormal aspect, trying to make things with just a full horror game, I don't really like that approach. So hopefully this DLC doesn't do that. I don't know though. But anyways, let's continue watching, and yeah, I'll give my thoughts on what I think is gonna happen. Yeah, so it seems like something is guiding Rose. Say that thing is saying focus here. Now, a lot of the community is saying that that's Ethan, and I wouldn't. You know what? That would make sense, even though I don't want it. I don't want that to be the answer. But you know what? It kind of goes back to my video that I did about 5 things that Resident Evil 8 DLC shouldn't do. And sure enough, what I stated in that video that they shouldn't do is focus on Rose. That's actually what they actually did. Now, the only thing that I can actually see as a benefit to focusing on Rose as a DLC is if they just finish the winter story with this Shadow of Rose DLC. You know, I think that would actually be really good if they just stopped it after this DLC. If they just put a conclusion to all of this paranormal kind of nonsense that they've been going on with Resident Evil 8. You know, that's one of the things that I didn't like about Resident Evil 8 was the fact that, you know, that the lords had powers, especially Heisenberg. Like the whole aspect of him being like a hobo Magneto was not Resident Evil. Now, that's not to say that I hated Resident Evil 8 Village. I actually really liked Village, but you know what I mean? Like I don't really like that direction that they're heading in. 文字の意味でした。角を狙い。どれ角？標準してってこと？ R こっちでこっちの L R1 ボタンを使ってください。あ、何これ？何これ？能力なんだ。いや。反応してる。うわ。何？なんか能力持ってますね。何？Yeah, that's very Parasite Eve 2-esque. You know, the fact that she has powers. I don't know. I don't like this direction for this DLC at all. You know, and I actually did another video talking about 5 things that I think the DLC should have done, and I hope that maybe Resident Evil 9 takes some of those ideas, or it continues in that route, because this direction I'm not a big fan of. I'll be honest with you. ハンドガンの弾7発持ったけど今のやつに10発ぐらい使っちゃった。元が取れない。一発でわかるでしょ、なんか聞いてない感じ。いやなんか狙えって書いてあるから。ちょっとマイナス。待って。これも書くだよ。書くない。何これ？書くない。
これ角ないな。
あ、上だ、上にありました。
あ、上だ。角狙う。何この能力。うわ、
面白いですね。なんか浄化するような。
うわ、本当だね。崩れていくね。
敵倒した時こんな感じでしたよね。
あ、確かに。もずく。
ボス系の
クリーチャーみたいなの倒したらああいう風になるよね。
あ、これドミトレスク城の屋上にありましたね。
そうかも。
あったね。
でこれ今地下降りていく感じだ。
はいはいはい。
長いな。
だいぶ長めの。なんか右下の
そう、このなんか
うにゃうにゃも気になりますよね。
どれ？
右下に10のところの。
あ、本当だ。右下の10。細いな。
なんだろう。血管みたいな。
これ城だ。
城です。ああ、来た。
あ、角だ、角。
角どれだ。
回り道は。
回り道はない。
あ、角が見えないんじゃないですか。
あ、角が見えないからここ意味ないんだ。
なるほど。
いける。あ、いけるみたいです。
The person playing isn't doing much. Like they're just walking really slow.
ね、足元取られる感じだね。
大丈夫か？大丈夫ですかこれ？大丈夫ですか？
なんだこれ。
Oh dang, she's dead. Yeah, so this is very nightmarish. Again, very kind of supernatural. Yeah, it's very supernatural. I don't know if I like that. You know, it's very nightmarish. So I don't know. Like, again, I don't really like that. I do appreciate though that I do appreciate that they did explain that this is not going to be like Resident Evil. It's not. So like the developers did state, I remember the guy in the IGN video, he did state, you know, like the developers already stated that this isn't going to be like Resident Evil. So don't expect that. But it's like, well, this is a DLC, so shouldn't I expect that? I don't know what they said word for word, but going back to what I was saying, I don't really, you know, I do appreciate that this is just all in her mind, essentially, that this is that I guess the DLC that we're gonna get is all going to be in Rose's mind. That's what it seems like to me. So I don't know. I'm definitely gonna try it, but okay, they're just replaying the same thing that we just saw. Okay, the person's going a lot faster now, it seems. Yeah, they're not going to do the same thing. Okay. I guess they didn't get hurt. I don't know what this is about.
ナイス。
はい、ナイス。ナイス角。
あ、そうか。1個目のやつ壊さないと鉄砲の弾取れないんか。
でも18発ぐらいは
ありますか。
出ました。
ここ開かないっすね。
お、なんか出てきた。なんか出てきた。
お久しぶりです。
知り合い。
知り合い
角は出てないです。角の指示ないです。
あぶね。
最初にあったコメントがお久しぶりですだった。これも角はある。
あ、これ反応します。
ナイス角。
こういうのを壊して道を作ってって、はい。ロングマガジン。
謎解き要素で角がどこにあるかわからないみたいなのが。
そうっすね。
そう考えるとローズしか進めない道なんですね。
あ、確かに。
壺です。
I don't know. This is kind of boring gameplay. It seemed like the person that was playing really slowed down.
これ言っちゃダメ。
ダメらしいです。
角探しいいですね。
そうだね。多分まだ序章だからまだこんな分かりやすくありますけど、おそらく進むともっと分かりづらいところにあったりするんだろうな。
なるほど。
あ、やばい。抜ける。危ない。すげえ、これ引っ掛けじゃねえかよ。
角。
核はこっちないから、おそらく僕の推理によると、回り込んで探していくんじゃないかな。
なるほど。あ、いけた。
ここ反応してます。
はい、ナイスです。
Okay.
ナイス核はナイス。
This whole DLC is just her.
アイテム
This whole DLC is just them just doing that same power over and over again. Like, this is kind of boring. If this is gonna be like, if this is even just one chunk of the DLC, are we gonna get different? I mean, they did show us different powers in the TGS trailer. Like, we saw them freezing a couple of guys, but I don't know, dude. This is kind of lame. Now, I know that some people might say, well, you know what? You know, about the stuff that I mentioned about the paranormal stuff and my issue with it. You know, some people might say, well, what about Wesker? Like, how come, you know, he's basically like he's basically, you know, like a evolved human. You know, he's got all of these powers. He can run really fast. How come you didn't have an issue with that? Well, that was different, mostly because what I really liked about the whole Wesker part of the Resident Evil story is that Wesker was kind of like the super soldier. And so I kind of liked, again, they tried to keep it in a scientific way. And also the whole arc with Wesker, you know, trying to basically push all of humanity and into, you know, by pushing evolution and forcing evolution with the use of viruses, which was actually Oswald E. Spencer's dream. You know, that was his whole goal for building and constructing Umbrella from the ground up. You know, that was always something that I kind of liked. Again, it's grounded in science, but when it comes to this kind of scientific, it's giving me a lot of vibes of Parasite Eve 2. And my hope for this DLC so far, you know, is that it just stays like this, like it stops. But you know what? I don't think that's going to be the case, since, you know, if we remember the end of Resident Evil 8 Village, when Rose actually goes up and to the graveyard and visits her father's grave, and she goes back to the car, she talks to the guy that's her driver and basically tells him, like, Chris doesn't even know what I'm capable of, or something along those lines. You know what I mean? And, you know, she basically threatens the driver, like, you know, like, don't insult me or I'll hurt you with my powers. You know, and they were kind of talking about that in Resident Evil 8. That was the whole chat that Heisenberg and Ethan had. I don't know. I just don't really like this direction at all. My hope is that with this DLC is that it just finishes this weird arc that Resident Evil has had, playing around with this paranormal stuff. Because like I said, this is kind of just bordering on Parasite Eve 2. And that, to me, it's too much of going, you know, to another direction. And I hope that's not the case. You know, like when Resident Evil 9 comes out, I hope that we don't get more of this. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So, yeah, that's just my only concern. Now, I'm still going to play this game. I'm not, you know, even though these are all, if anything, I just want you guys to know that I'm also just stating my concerns that I have for the DLC. This isn't like, you know, I'm just saying, oh, I'm not going to play this. This sucks. I'm not trying to be negative. This is basically just me stating, you know, my concerns for what I think, and I hope that this isn't what happens, but it seems there's a high probability that this is the route that they're going to go, and especially for Resident Evil 9 in the future, but I hope that's not the case. Anyways, let's continue. There's only a couple more minutes left. I don't remember this as part of the castle, this library section. So they have added new assets to the game. Now, this is something that we noticed in the the Tokyo Game Show trailer that they showed of Shadow of Rose. And you know what this reminded me a lot of? This reminded me of the hair, and I actually talked about this in the live stream. For those of you that stay tuned for that actually, you know, showed up for that, thank you so much. And I go live every Saturday, by the way. I guess I'll mention that. But yeah, going back to what I was saying, this whole thing that of the zombie grabbing Rose's face actually reminds me of the Dementors in the Harry Potter series. So you know what? And you know what? There's something else also that kind of reminds me of Harry Potter. And I'm actually in the process of making a video on that. It's not talking solely just about that, but I do mention that in another video that I'm working on right now. So yeah, but going back to what I was saying, I think, You know, this is something that I stated in the DLC video of 5 things that I think Resident Evil 8 DLC should do is incorporate and show us a different version of the infection. And so that's something that I'm actually happy with this DLC, is that they're adding this new type, this new variant of the mold virus. Now, of course, I do think that this is all just happening in her mind as she's connecting with the Megamycete, because we do remember from that earlier trailers, I think she was talking to some guy with glasses, and then he does mention to her about the Megamycete. So my guess is with this DLC is that you go and meet somebody and he says, look, I have this Megamycete, maybe you can talk with your father, because your father's consciousness is stuck in the Megamycete or some kind of weird paranormal thing like that, because that was already established in the Resident Evil 8 Village lore. So yeah, I find that interesting. I do appreciate that we're not just fighting werewolves again, because they could have done that. You know, of course they're reusing assets because this is DLC, but even like this room, I do like that, you know, there is a library. I don't remember this particular room in the castle. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this whole area right now, what we've seen so far, doesn't remind me of that. So that's interesting. I like that. But anyways, let's continue.
セクハラですね、あれ。
セクハラハラスメントですね。
ハラスメント。
ちょっと待って、何これ今の。
怖っ。攻撃が怖い。顔水が出てきました。
顔吸われたよ。
わあ。
ナイス。あ、ちょっと待って、油断してる場合じゃねえぞ。皆さん拍手してる場合。
カンさん。
あ、終わってんのか。
Okay, I think that was it. Okay, I think that was the end of the 6 minutes. Yeah, so that was the end of the 6 minutes. Yeah, so that was the end of the 6 minutes. Now, I do have to say that, you know what, they did record 30 minutes. That's what IGN said. And there was different footage in IGN. I'm not going to show that here because, you know what, it was more of the same thing. And also, the IGN video was really cropped badly. Like, it was just in the corner of the screen. It was weird. I don't know what they were doing over there. GameSpot also kind of showed us a few glimpses, but these companies aren't allowed to showcase anymore until we get closer to the Resident Evil 8 DLC. So there's no real point in me covering that. You know, I think what we just saw right now is basically going to give us a gist of what we can expect to see in the DLC. Now, as I mentioned before, in the Tokyo Game Show trailer, we did see Rose use a different power where she actually froze the enemies. Again, I want to be very clear here and state that I'm not trying to be negative. I'm not trying to be like, oh, this is going to suck, this is awful, whatever. But what I am going to say is that I do have concerns. As a Resident Evil fan, I am going to have concerns. I don't really like the direction, as stated several times in this video. I don't like the direction of them going too much into the paranormal side, making it too much into like a full-blown horror game, because that was never the vision of Resident Evil. That was never the case. And, you know, you can also see an interview that I actually reacted to with the Resident Evil creator. That was something that he spoke about in that interview that he did with the Silent Hill creator. He said, I was really cautious about going full horror. And so, you know what I mean? Like, if the creator of Resident Evil said that, then it's not like I'm just making stuff up here. You know what I mean? Resident Evil has never been fully horror, and that's something that I've always liked about it. And so, you know, we have Silent Hills, we have Parasite Eve 2, but yeah, and so I do want to make it very clear, again, that I'm not trying to bash this DLC, going to say that it's awful. It's just, it kind of sucks because this is kind of like what I kind of predicted that they were kind of going to go this route. And that video that I stated of 5 things that they shouldn't do for the Village DLC. And sure enough, that's basically what we're seeing. And so that's why if anything, I'm just kind of disappointed because it's kind of like a wasted opportunity. Now, the DLC could still be good. It could still be interesting. I actually like Resident Evil 8 Village. I've stated that multiple times on the channel, and I've also stated multiple times on the channel that I actually don't like Resident Evil 7. So you guys know my thoughts on that. Well, I am going to make a separate video talking more in depth about the Resident Evil 7, but that comes in the future. But yeah, so you know what? Am I excited for this DLC? Yeah, I am. I think it'll be good. I think it'll be interesting if anything. But do I feel a little disappointed that they're kind of going in this paranormal kind of side of it? Is the DLC, what concerns me also is this whole DLC just going to be Rose just interacting with the Megamycete and her learning about the events that occur in Resident Evil 8? Are they going to showcase, oh, this is going to be so lame if they do. I'm calling it right now. You know, if if her journey into the Megamycete showcases that Ethan is going to come back, like that she goes back into the final moments when Ethan pushes the C4 button and the Megamycete explodes and we see Ethan kind of running away or something, and then she's like, oh my gosh, my dad is actually alive, and then that sets us up for Resident Evil 9. That's going to be kind of lame because, as many of you guys know, I don't like Ethan Winters. I don't really like that character at all. I'm really excited that they're showcasing and that we can actually see his face now in the third-person DLC. I'm not too happy about the fact that the cutscenes are all weird. Like, they're not... We don't see the cutscenes in third person, sadly. We only see them in first person. It's really dumb. I don't like that. So, yeah, you know what? We're going to have to see. Right now, I'm kind of reserving my judgments on it. These are just all my concerns. So again, I want to make that very clear. These are just all my concerns as a Resident Evil fan. I hope that this DLC turns out to be good. But you know what? We're only just a couple of weeks away from it, and so hopefully we can see that. But anyways, like I mentioned before, if you guys want to see my video where I actually talk about 5 things that the DLC should have done, then click this video. Anyways, thanks for watching.